My best friend sabotaged my wedding, and my guests applauded her for it. Not because she ruined it, because she saved me from marrying a man who had been rehearsing the perfect groom while performing something else entirely behind a door I did not know existed. My best friend Carmen has been in my life since we were 9. She is the person I call when I cannot figure out if something is wrong or if I am being paranoid, and her answer is always the same. Tell me the facts. I'll tell you which one. She is a fact person. She does not deal in feelings until the facts have been organized. She has never been wrong. My fiancé Elliot proposed after 2 years. Beautiful proposal. A rooftop. String lights. A photographer I later learned had been hired for the Instagram post, not the moment, because the photographer's invoice was filed under content creation in a wedding budget spreadsheet Elliot kept in a shared Google Drive I was apparently not shared on. Carmen was my maid of honor. She planned the shower. She went to every fitting. She told me later that she started inspecting after the engagement party. Elliot's college friend Marcos pulled her aside at the bar and said, "Take care of her. He's not what she thinks he is." Carmen asked what he meant. Marcos said, "Just watch. When nobody's performing, watch." Carmen watched for 7 months. She told me none of it until the wedding day because she said, "I needed facts, not feelings. Feelings get denied. Facts get witnessed." She watched Elliot's phone at dinner parties, not the screen, his body, the way he angled it away from me, the way he put it face down when I walked into a room and picked it back up when I walked out. She watched Elliot miss my shower. He said he had a client meeting that ran late. Carmen called his office. The receptionist said Elliot left at noon. The shower started at 4. He arrived at 7. 5 hours unaccounted for. Carmen asked where he had been. He said, "Wedding errands." She checked the shared wedding calendar. No errands scheduled. She did not tell me. She documented. In a folder she titled, "Insurance." The wedding was Saturday. 63 guests. A venue with hydrangeas and a string quartet I had chosen because the cellist played a piece my grandmother used to hum, and the sound of it made me believe that dead people can attend weddings if you choose the right song. I was in the bridal suite. Carmen was doing my buttons. The dress had 41 buttons down the back because I had chosen a vintage design without considering that 41 buttons require a structural engineer and a maid of honor with the coordination of a neurosurgeon. At button 23, Carmen stopped. She said, "I need to tell you something." She pulled out the folder. She said, "I have spent 7 months watching your fiancé. I did not want to do this. I wanted to be wrong. I was not wrong." Inside were screenshots, phone records, location data from a shared family plan Carmen had accessed through Elliot's mother, who had given her the login because Elliot's mother trusted Carmen more than she trusted her own son, which should have been information by itself. Text conversations between Elliot and a woman named Kelsey. Not flirtatious, explicit, ongoing, 14 months, starting before the proposal. Phone records showed calls on nights he said he was working late or at the gym, and the afternoon of my shower when he was gone for 5 hours. Location data showed his phone at an address across town on 11 separate occasions. The address belonged to Kelsey. I sat in a wedding dress with 23 buttons fastened and 18 undone, and a folder in my lap that contained 14 months of a parallel life maintained with the operational precision of a man who keeps a content creation budget line item and a Google Drive his bride is not shared on. I said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Carmen said, "Because if I told you in March, you would have asked him and he would have denied it, and you would have believed him because you love him and love believes explanations. I needed enough that the explanation couldn't survive the evidence." She was right. In March, I would have believed anything, because in March, the dress still had all 41 buttons, and the future still had the shape he had given it, and I did not know the shape was hollow. I said, "I want him to know that I know," in front of everyone. Carmen buttoned the remaining 18 buttons. She straightened my veil. She said, "Let's go." I walked down the aisle, not to get married. I walked down the aisle because the aisle was his last performance, and I was about to end it in the space where he built it. Elliot was at the altar, the rehearsed smile. I reached the altar. The officiant started. I held up my hand. I said, "My maid of honor spent 7 months doing something I didn't ask her to do." She watched. She documented. She waited until today because she knew I wouldn't believe her in March, and she was right. I held up the folder. I said, "Her name is Kelsey. 14 months, 11 visits, and the 5 hours you were missing during my bridal shower, you were at her apartment." Elliot said, "This is insane. You're having a breakdown." I opened the folder. I held up the first screenshot, his own words. "To a woman he visited 11 times while I chose hydrangeas." Carmen stepped forward. She said, "If anyone would like to see the evidence, I have copies." She held up a stack. She had made 63 copies, one for every guest, like a wedding program, because Carmen is a fact person and facts are distributed, not hidden. Elliot said, "You're ruining our wedding." I said, "You ruined it in March. I'm just making the cancellation public." I turned around. I walked back up the aisle. The string quartet was still playing my grandmother's piece. Halfway up the aisle, I heard it. One person clapping, then 10, then all of them. 63 people stood up and applauded a bride walking away from an altar. Carmen was behind me. She said, "You made 63 copies?" She said, "I wanted to be thorough." I said, "Why did you finish the buttons? You knew the dress wasn't going to be worn for the purpose it was designed for." She said, "Because you deserve to walk that aisle looking exactly like what he lost." We drove to a diner in our dresses. We ate pancakes at 5 p.m. The waitress Rosanna said, "Are you coming from a wedding?" Carmen said, "We're coming from an ending." Rosanna said, "Endings deserve pancakes." She did not charge us. Then Carmen told me something I have not been able to stop thinking about. She said, "Marcos, the friend who told me to watch. I called him last week. He said, I didn't know about Kelsey. I knew about the one before Kelsey." Elliot had been engaged before me, 3 years ago, to a woman named Danielle. Marcos watched Elliot do the same thing. The angled phone, the disappearances. Danielle found out a week before the wedding. She canceled privately. No guests, no aisle, no applause. She just disappeared. Carmen said, "Marcos told me to watch because nobody watched for Danielle. Nobody made a folder. Nobody stood behind her with facts and copies. She walked away alone, in silence, without 63 people standing." The next morning, my phone had 47 missed calls, 31 from Elliot. I did not open a single voicemail. Elliot's calls would be begging or blaming or both. The calls from his side would be people punishing me for making them watch the truth. Carmen checked her phone and said, "He posted that the wedding was postponed due to a private family matter. He's rewriting it. Private family matter, postponed." Like 63 people had not watched me hold up a folder in a room full of hydrangeas. He was already building the clean version. version, the one where he was reasonable and I was the woman who caused a scene. I felt it, the first crack. Maybe I should have done it privately. Maybe 63 was too many. Carmen read one of Elliot's overnight texts aloud. Baby, you humiliated me. I made a mistake. One mistake. You owe me a conversation. She said, 14 months is not one mistake. 11 visits is not one mistake. He is counting on you doing the math wrong because you're in pain. He was counting on the pain to blur the numbers. Because when you are hurting, one mistake and 14 months can start to sound the same if the person saying it uses the right voice. And Elliot always had the right voice. That was the whole problem. He called. His voice was soft, broken, the rehearsed broken. He said, what happened yesterday wasn't you. That was Carmen. She poisoned this. Let me come over. Let me explain. I almost said yes. I wanted the version where 14 months and 11 visits added up to a man who still loved me. I could feel the word forming in my mouth. Then I looked at Carmen. She was standing holding the folder, not waving it, just holding it, like a fact, like the fact she had always been. I said, don't call me again. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I pressed both palms flat against the counter because I needed something solid. Then Summer called, Elliot's mother. I was expecting an attack. I was expecting the protective voice. Summer said, honey, are you safe? She said, my son just called me screaming that I betrayed him, and I need you to know something. I gave Carmen that login because I have watched my son lie to women his entire adult life, and I was not going to watch him do it to you without someone in that room holding the truth. She said, he's my son, and I love him, but love doesn't mean I let him destroy people. I asked her the question I had been carrying since the diner. I said, did you know about Danielle? The line went quiet, the quiet of someone who has been waiting 3 years for someone to ask. Summer said, Danielle called me 3 years ago. She asked me if I knew. I said no, that was the truth, but I also didn't look. I didn't look because I didn't want to see. Carmen looked. That's the difference. And I will carry Danielle's call for the rest of my life. Elliot's phone calls stopped. His strategy changed. Texts arrived from people who had been at the wedding. Elliot says Carmen made some of that stuff up. One asked if I had talked to someone, and I knew they did not mean a lawyer. One said, he's really hurting. Maybe you should hear him out. He was really hurting. The man who maintained a 14-month relationship while I chose hydrangeas and a string quartet because the cellist played my dead grandmother's song. That man was really hurting. Marcos called Carmen. He said, Elliot's telling people you doctored the screenshots. He's saying you've always been obsessed with breaking them up because you're jealous. Carmen said, you're the one who told me to watch him. Marcos said, what do you need from me? Carmen said, tell the truth, not to me, to anyone who asks. We wrote a single message together. No screenshots, no anger, just facts. I did not have a breakdown. Carmen did not fabricate anything. Elliot was unfaithful for 14 months. I have documentation. If he is telling you a different story, ask yourself why he hasn't denied the specific name, the specific address, or the specific dates. He can't, because they're real. I sent it to every person who had texted me. That night, Elliot pounded on my door. Not a knock, pounding. The kind that shakes the frame and rattles the deadbolt. I know you're in there. I just want to talk. 5 minutes. You owe me 5 minutes. Carmen put her hand on my arm. She said quietly, you don't owe him anything, especially not 5 minutes. His voice came through again. Carmen, if you're in there, this is between me and my fiancé. Like nothing had changed. Like I had not stood in front of 63 people and walked back up the aisle alone. Like the folder did not exist. I said through the door, I'm not your fiancé. I'm the woman you lied to for 2 years. Leave or I'm calling the police. His shadow was still under the door. Then his voice came through one more time. Not soft, not broken, something colder. He said, you're going to regret this, both of you. Then the shadow was gone. Carmen and I stood in the hallway listening to the silence he left behind, which sounded like the silence Danielle must have lived in for 3 years, except I was not in it alone. A week passed. The calls stopped. I went back to work. Nobody asked about the wedding. I sat at my desk and for 8 hours I was just a person at work, and that was enough. Carmen told me we were getting the dress preserved. I said, I'm never wearing it again. She said, that dress held 41 buttons and a woman who walked an aisle alone. It deserves to be kept. Then Carmen called on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was careful. She said, I found Danielle. She said, Marcos had her number. I called her. I told her what happened at the wedding. She cried for 11 minutes. I timed it because I didn't know what else to do. That was such a Carmen thing to say. She measured someone's pain because measuring is how Carmen loves people. She said, Danielle wants to meet you. She said, because I walked away in silence and I have been silent for 3 years and I need to sit across from someone who walked away in noise. Danielle walked away in silence. I walked away in noise. Same woman, same altar, same man. Except she did it alone and I had Carmen and 63 people and a folder and applause. She had a quiet room and her own shame and 3 years of wondering if she was wrong. I met Danielle at a coffee shop. She sat down and did not say hello. She said, he proposed on a rooftop, didn't he? I nodded. String lights? I nodded. He used the same rooftop, the same photographer, the same speech. I know because I helped him write it. The room tilted. I had thought the words he said on one knee were words he found in the specific shape of loving me. They were a script, written by another woman, performed for me. Danielle said, the photographer's invoice. Was it filed under content creation? I whispered, yes. She said, I set up that budget system. He kept it. He kept the spreadsheet. He just removed my name and added yours. I was living in a house she had built and I did not know she existed until a week ago. Danielle told me how she found out 1 week before her own wedding. She confronted him privately. He cried. He did the soft, broken voice. When the crying did not work, he said she was overreacting. He said, every man makes mistakes. Like 14 months with another woman was the same as forgetting to take out the trash. She canceled quietly. She told guests it was off and did not explain why because she was ashamed. Not of him. Of herself for loving the performance. She spent 2 years wondering if she was wrong to leave. 2 years of silence because she asked Marcos not to tell anyone. And Marcos kept that promise even though it cost him. Even though he watched Elliot get engaged to me and could not say a word. Danielle said, you did what I was too afraid to do. You said it out loud. In a room full of people. With evidence. 63 people stood up for you. I had 0. Not because people didn't care. Because I never gave them the chance to. I took her hand. I said, you're not silent anymore. Something in her face changed. The glued together vase let one crack show. She said, no, I'm not. Then Summer called. Her voice was strained. She said, Elliot is engaged. He proposed to Kelsey, last night. He used the same rooftop. The photographer called me to confirm the booking. The same photographer. I felt nothing for 5 seconds. Then I felt everything. Not jealousy, horror, because the machine does not stop. It just reloads. New woman, same rooftop, same string lights, same speech that Danielle wrote. Same photographer filed under content creation. Same performance. He did not learn. He found the next audience. I called Carmen. I said, he proposed to Kelsey. Same rooftop, same photographer, same speech. Carmen said, she doesn't know. Kelsey doesn't know what he is. I said, I want to do what someone should have done for Danielle and what you did for me. I wrote a letter, not angry, factual. I included my name and Danielle's name. I called her and she gave permission immediately, no pause. I included dates, and a single line I rewrote 4 times. I am not writing this because I'm bitter. I am writing this because nobody wrote it for me, and someone had to write it for Danielle, and Carmen had to build a folder for me, and you deserve to have the information before you find it the way we did. I knocked on Kelsey's door. She was wearing a ring, the same setting Danielle had described. I said, I was supposed to marry Elliot 2 weeks ago. Before me, a woman named Danielle was supposed to marry him 3 years ago. I'm not here to fight. I'm here because I wish someone had knocked on my door. I held out the letter. She took it. Her hand was shaking. The ring caught the light. I said, read it, then decide for yourself. That's all anyone owes you, the chance to decide with the truth. Carmen was waiting in the car. She said, did she take it? I said, she took it. I said, it was done the minute you stopped at button 23. Carmen said, button 23 was the hardest one, not because of the button, because I knew the next thing I said was going to end your wedding, and I had to decide if I loved you enough to be the person you hated for 10 minutes in exchange for being the person who told you the truth for the rest of your life. I said, I never hated you, not for 1 second. She said, I know, but I didn't know that at button 23. 2 months later, I was sitting in the same diner. Rosanna brought me coffee. She said, no wedding dress this time? I said, no, just me. She said, that's enough. My phone buzzed. A text from Danielle. Kelsey called off the engagement. She said to tell you thank you. I did not feel triumph. I felt the quiet that comes after something heavy finally stops falling. Carmen slid into the booth. She said, pancakes? I said, pancakes. And for the first time in 2 months, the future did not have a shape someone else gave it. It was blank. And blank, I was learning, is not empty. Blank is just honest.